we got it.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone today. Come on, Gen Z, I know you're in the crowd, come on. Okay, well, it has been said that it takes 8 seconds to catch the attention span of Generation Z, Generation Z. Oh, and by the way, I should preface, you have 2 Americans and a Canadian here, so you are going to hear Gen Z and Gen Z. Both are happening. 8 seconds to catch the attention span of this generation. This is a generation born into a world of technology. Simone, what does this generation need from us?
I think, this generation acknowledging that they're not a monolith, right? No generation or group is, but off the break, respect, right? And then I think in addition to that, while identity is important, not being reduced to their identities. And I think, I think a lot about, having a conversation with this generation, not being spoken to or at, but having a conversation with is the expectation.
Absolutely. Liz?
This is a group of digital natives. They've grown up with devices in their hands, and they've seen a lot of storytelling. And I think what's most important to them is authenticity. They want to be seen and heard, and they expect honesty and raw truth from the brands and the people who they're interacting with. They will spot BS a mile away. So I think that's one of the most identifying qualities of Gen Z.
As the editor-in-chief of Women's Health magazine, Liz, Simone with Refinery 29, who's leading whom? I mean, I'm a millennial, and I remember that we were chasing after... Hello? Okay, there we go. As the millennial, we were chasing after the brand. If you remember CK1 and chasing after the media and the artists back in the day, who's leading whom here? Is it the publication brands putting out that for Gen Z, or is it Gen Z dictating? Liz?
Sure, I'll start. I think it's both, to be honest. I think it's a two-way street. As a brand, I am always thinking about where my audience is, what they're talking about, what they're thinking about, what the conversations are. We want to, have our finger on the pulse of that. So it's important to know how they're consuming media, what topics are important to them. At the same time, as a brand, I think we have an honor and a responsibility to tell the stories that are important and not to pander to what, the whims of the way the wind is blowing. So I think it's a combination. I think the great thing is in this Venn diagram of what people are talking about and thinking about and what we as editors see because of our access to experts and research and scientists, there's a sweet spot in the middle, and I personally think that's where the magic happens.
Simone, here we go. Simone, what is it about your model at Refinery 29? Because I know you made a deliberate push to get to this group. What is about your model that works?
I think for us, piggybacking on Liz's point about choosing to tell the stories that are important, right? And, there is a fluidity of a relationship between the ideas, the trends, and the conversations that we have with our audiences, regardless of where they are. But I think for us, what's really worked is telling stories from a personal POV, right? Letting people from marginalized communities in particular tell their own stories, as opposed to saying, okay, this is what this person went through. Like, you pen the essay, you do the TikTok video, And so that for us has really touched a nerve, because there's an intimacy there that can't be ignored. And to your point about authenticity, that really hits the mark for us.
Absolutely. Now, this is a generation, as many of you know. I'm just flabbergasted with how confident they are. This is something that I really admire about this generation. But do you both think that there's an overconfidence there? Sometimes that there's blind spots that they may not be noticing with that level of confidence?
I could start. Oh my gosh, no, I have, like you, Emily, tremendous respect for this generation, and sometimes when I think about the state of the world and how turbulent and heartbreaking things look, the thing that gives me hope is Gen Z. And that this generation and their confidence and their curiosity and their creativity and their passion for making change, that is our future. And that honestly helps me sleep at night. So I say, like, bring that confidence, because that is the energy we need to change things in the world. And there are a lot of things that need changing and a lot of things that can improve. So I want to, like, fan that fire and give them all the tools and information they need to go make those dreams a reality.
Simone? Yeah, I couldn't co-sign any harder. I think I love that you said, fan that fire, because I think the tools are really important. And I think if you're asking about blind spots, right, I think the only thing that they lack, right, is experience. That's it. You can't buy that. You can't read that. You can't watch it on TikTok. And so that's something that is a very personal journey for everyone in this group. And so I think that, I'll give an example. In terms of things that I admire, I love that this generation is very clear about their expectations when it comes to school life balance, work-life balance, and any sort of responsibility and balance, right, and accountability. And what I find is sometimes in an interview for a job, a young person will sit in front of me and they'll say, well, how long are you expecting me to be working, right? And I think to previous generations, you wouldn't dare ask that question, right? Or you frame it differently. And I admire the intention of that deeply, right? I think sometimes what can be off-putting is how it's framed, right? And so I think that there's an exchange there between the experience, but the intention is completely admirable.
Right, I mean, this is a generation that's not afraid to ask for what they're worth.
Yep, 100%.
That is one thing that I personally very much admire, and it's very evident, like you said. I'm very curious to know, they have such a powerful voice, and collectively, globally, in this country, they really do hold brands, hold publications like yours to account. They've sometimes flipped it on its head, and how do you navigate that? Because they do have a powerful voice for criticism. How do you navigate that situation? Go ahead.
Sorry. I think, I definitely agree that in some cases, social in particular can be weaponized, right? But the one way that I try to deal with that or even mitigate that is proactively just be transparent, right? As a leader, as a manager, as a communicator, as a human, frankly, just have conversations with people on a regular basis, be clear about expectations, and also, constantly having oftentimes a lot of the same conversations, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with repetition in our business in particular. And so I think before people even take it to Twitter, that's the new take it to the streets. It's like, just have conversations with people. There's an expectation for accountability, especially among this generation that I love and I respect. So I do try to live up to that, but then also not everything requires a response. If you're at an organization and something has happened and it's all over, Twitter or wherever, you don't always have to respond. Looking inward sometimes is the response.
What I think about and what a core value of women's health for the now almost 18 years it's existed is to get the facts right. We are a science-based, expert-backed brand, and when you tell the truth and when the science is accurate, that really speaks for itself and stands up no matter what platform we're talking about. And on the sort of and also, words matter and visuals matter. And thank goodness there are people watching us and will take us to task if we're not doing it correctly. It is on us as media brands to reflect the world that we live in and to show an inclusive group of women for women's health, all different religions, sexualities, ethnicities, body types, ability levels, ages, life stories. And that needs to be reflected in the visuals, and it also needs to be reflected in the words, our display copy, the experts that we're going to. Like Simone said, the stories we're telling, the actual women who are real everyday women who we're tapping for quotes in those stories. And I think when the editors are passionate about that and put that content out there, then it has the best chance of being received in the way that we hope that it will be.
Absolutely. And can I just piggyback
Yeah,
on that?
go
You
ahead.
really sparked something. I think none of us are perfect, right? We're humans behind these brands, right? We are also, members of humanity, and acknowledging when you make a mistake, right? And just being, really open and honest about that. I think that goes back to the transparency part of it, right? Where the emergent audiences are definitely watching, and I love that we have that accountability, but acknowledging when you make a mistake, and inviting discourse, not cancel culture, but discourse. And that's something that we try to do at Refinery all the time.
Liz, when we talk about health, mental health is, as you mentioned, a huge aspect of this generation and what they are very passionate about.
Yeah.
How do you strike a balance between entertainment and education? Because that's been a huge topic because, how do they navigate that? So much is coming at them from everywhere you can think of with this level of technology we are in. So how do you strike that balance?
Yeah, well, you nailed it. This generation is passionate about mental health. They are more aware than any previous generation about their own mental health and how important it is. And at the same time, their brains are still developing. And we are all humans, and they are too, going through this world with everything that's happening, being exposed to some really hard, difficult challenges. So they're not only interested in it, they're personally experiencing it. And for me as an editor, what's most important with any type of content, but particularly things like mental health, which can be challenging or even a little scary or traumatic to talk about and think about, is that the content is engaging. The less sterile, dry it is, the more engaging, conversational, again, authentic, the better. And that might be, like Simone and I keep talking about, lifting up underserved voices and showing everyday women who are experiencing these things, and also leveraging celebrities who have massive followings and platforms. And when they can share their vulnerability and their experiences with mental health, that often can make a huge and powerful impact. I don't know, do you
Simone,
guys think
it's
about
really
that?
a matter of cutting through that clutter, isn't it? It's really a matter of cutting through that clutter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the word you said, engaging, right? When interactive is really important, because I do call a lot of what we do edutainment, right? Because, to your point, we have a responsibility to be factual, the bare minimum, report the facts, right? But then, yes, especially depending on what space you're in, you want to make it interesting. You want people to spend time with what you and your team are creating, right? And you want them to not just spend time with it, but internalize it, think it, share it with others, right? So I think, again, keeping the facts is in solid reporting is the bare minimum, but it's really important that we understand people's consumption habits, where they're consuming, what mindset they might be in when they're consuming, and what is it that we're trying to accomplish in any given piece of content.
Absolutely. Now, further to you, many of you know, I'm just going to use an example here. If we look at the Roe versus Wade case, this has monopolized the media in the past few months, and this generation particularly has really taken up with this issue. Abortion rights in America, onus of your own body as a woman. What struck you both the most about covering this story in particular? What struck you the most? Liz, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, sure. So women's health and reproductive health is a huge part of what we do at Women's Health. We've covered it in all different ways, shapes and forms over the years. We just, in September, we published a huge package called Abortion is Healthcare. And it was a service package all about how to get access to it, what things were available to you depending on where you lived, what the legislation said. This was right after some laws were passed in Texas. Sadly, we didn't know how prescient that would be with everything that happened months later. And so that story in particular has gotten a lot of re-engagement and traffic. It is heartbreaking, but we are proud to be a brand that firmly stands on that side of the issue and gives our audience the facts and information. I think, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and so this isn't just about me and my friends. This is about my little girl Lucy and the world that she's growing up in. And so I am heartened, again, going back to what I said at the very beginning, I am heartened that this generation cares so passionately about this that they are out marching, that they are taking the actions, because media brands like Simone's and mine can tell the stories, and we will keep doing it, and we are lucky and proud to have these huge platforms to share it, but it's going to take everyday humans, particularly in Gen Z, to actually create change when it comes to women's reproductive rights.
Yep, I feel strongly, about everything that you said. Similarly, at Refinery, we've been covering abortion for a very long time. And we have a package called Sex Re-Education, right? Because just even sex ed is not taught broadly in schools around the world, particularly in North America and in the UK. And is part of our mission to help change that, right? And to knowing that we have so many young people who come to our platforms for education and just to understand, it's our mission to contextualize the world around us, right? I think one of the most surprising things when we really rolled up our sleeves and started covering what's been happening most recently is the believability gap, right? That's what I'm calling it. There were so many young people who were just like, no, this is never going to happen.
Yeah.
This is just so ridiculous that it'll never happen. And then those papers leaked. And it was really about, okay, yes, it's probably happening, right? If it does, we'll cover it appropriately. But there was that gap there that I think a lot of us who spend time in media, right, and our creators just kind of assumed didn't exist. But when you really have conversations on the street, one-on-one with emergent audiences, and just people, sitting in a park, you realize there's a believability gap there. And I think you said one key word, access, right? Mm-hmm. How do you get access? How do I understand? We are a service brand. I like to call Refinery 29 service with soul, right? And so throughout contextualizing, we want to make sure that you understand, okay, if this does happen, where do I go? What does it mean for where I live? What does it mean for my friend? I also have a daughter. She's 8, a little bit younger than yours. And so similarly, not just from a brand and being a content creator, I'm thinking about the generation after Gen Z and after that. What does it mean for the world we live in?
Now, just going back real quickly to the abortion story, whether we're talking about abortion story, Black Lives Matter, social justice, any of these host of issues that have been high-strung in the media, this has all generated this lack of trust. It really has. And I know both of you mentioned it before, you really can't BS this group. I mean, they're not standing for it. They will make their voices known. Is that lack of trust for publications, for various media platforms, and for the news media, is it salvageable? Liz?
Could you say the last part?
Is it salvageable? Can these platforms salvage that trust back?
That's a great question. And there's skepticism, their lack of trust. I don't really blame them in many ways. And I go back to what I can do as an editor and what we can do as brands is give factual, science-backed, expert-based information. That is the way you earn trust. You tell the truth. And again, that authenticity. I'm going to veer very light compared to some of the topics we're talking about, but I have noticed on social media as we experiment with different franchises and things, fitness is a big piece of what we do at Women's Health. And I love it because our audience, what they respond most to is not the curated, polished, after picture or video. When it's all done and say, I'll give pull-ups as an example because I love pull-ups. They don't just want to see me or a fitness influencer or another woman doing 5 pull-ups. They want to see the journey. Yep. They want to see what happens at the beginning when it's really hard and you're gritting your teeth and you can't even lift an inch off the floor. And I think that's part of where trust is built, is showing that journey and kind of looking under the hood and showing the tough parts and then the not so pretty, polished, curated parts. So in addition to getting the facts right and being honest, that is a big part of our mission, and what we're leaning into more at Women's Health is being more open and transparent about the journey. And we're seeing a lot of the bond deepening and the connection with Gen Z and all different demographics when we can be more real.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. At Refinery, we don't retouch our photos. Even if we're working with talent, celebrity, a model, we don't retouch. We may, correct lighting or color, but we don't take out stretch marks. We don't take out cellulite, moles, freckles, anything that makes you who you are. And so because of that, and examples like that, we've earned the trust. Trust has to be earned. And also, I think earlier I mentioned, letting people, especially from marginalized communities, tell their own stories, right? Not parachuting in. That earns trust as well. So, +1 to the idea of number one, facts, 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 tell the truth, right? Yeah. But the consistency around that is also wildly important.
Going back to trust, confronting power overall. My generation, I knew we were scared to, backtalk, and I feel like we were the last generation to say, put their hand up in the class and say, may I please go to the bathroom? They're demanding onus, they're demanding accountability, and I think that's just absolutely refreshing to finally see. And would you agree that people are finally listening?
I think, yes, I think they are. And as a rule follower, I sometimes get a little squeamish watching how confident and bold and courageous they are, but it's awesome. And I'm learning from Gen Z. I would just kind of to piggyback on that, because we've been talking a lot about social media and discourse and cancel culture. One thing that's really important to my brand, Women's Health, is that the discourse is respectful.
Yep.
And that we're creating a safe community. Because when the comments get mean and people are taking each other out, we're not here for that. That has jumped shark into a different territory, and that is not productive, and that is not going to take us in the direction we need to go as humanity, as a world, as change makers. So I guess I just want to, that's like a subtle or not so subtle difference. Absolutely speak your mind and share your feelings and your thoughts, but do it in a respectful, constructive way, and then be open to hearing the opinions of others. I think that's going to be key to this generation, is to not only raise your hand and speak your truth, but also to be open-minded and listen to other people's feedback.
So Simone, then, as we count down on time here, Gen Z, are we on the brink of the most powerful generation? Is this the most powerful generation?
Honestly, the jury's still out, but I think the power that each of us have acknowledged is that they do have a microphone, but they are active, right? There isn't a complacency that oftentimes, or even fear, complacency and or fear, right, that previous generations have had. Growing up on the internet, they obviously, have tons of information at their fingertips, but they have several microphones, not just one, but several. And, I think because they've inherited the messy world that we live in, they only know to be active and to be vocal. And I think that there is a power in that, and I respect and love it.
Absolutely. Well, as we come to the close of this, this is the third largest generation, Gen Z. It's the most ethnically diverse generation.
Yeah.
And so with that, I encourage all of you Gen Z, Gen Zers in the audience, and everybody watching who watches this, keep doing what you're doing, stay confident, stay focused, and the world is yours. This world is ahead of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.